The views and opinions of the show hosts and their guests are not necessarily those of the PTV network, their sponsors, or affiliates. Viewer discretion is advised. The views and opinions.
Empty thoughts and your empty eyes, full of Botox to mask your disguise. You say the things no one wants to hear while the sucker next to you is buying you a bag.
We're gonna have a little Q&A, and at the risk of sounding redundant, please. Thank you, Mrs. January.
Yeah, talking is not just about getting out what you have to say or just talking, but it's also being prepared to listen to what the other person has to say.
Like a Greek philosopher once said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak.
That was unfathomably deep.
Talk to me.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually a very good question.
You stay classy, web surfers.
And welcome. This is Monday night, June the 8th. Yes, I'm checking my records here. And this is your current edition of Let's Talk. I am Michael Johnson here on the Para Rock TV Media Network. And this evening, we have kind of a controversial subject bringing up. And I have a very special guest. And I'm going to go ahead and let him tell you who he is and what he's all about. Robert, the microphone's yours.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Capecchi. I'm the Deputy Director of State Policies at the Marijuana Policy Project. MPP is a national nonprofit 501c3, 501c4 issue advocacy organization, and we focus with the nation's largest marijuana-only advocacy organization as far as the laws we work on. We're responsible for changing a lot of the state laws that have changed since the first medical marijuana law was passed in California in 1996. I work primarily, in fact, solely on the state level policies, so I don't do anything on Capitol Hill here in D.C. I am based out of Washington, D.C., but I do work and kind of monitor the legislative work coming out of maybe a dozen to 15 states across the country, South Carolina being one of many. I've been at MPP since October of 2009 when I first joined the team there. Since then, I've helped change some laws in Rhode Island and Minnesota and Delaware, among other states that we've put some time and energy into. I kind of got started on the issue personally, I suppose. My interest stems from a psychopharmacology course that I took in undergraduate school when we were just discussing a third of the semester was devoted to over-the-counter drugs, a third was devoted to psychotropic medications, and the other third was to illicit drugs. And we would discuss these drugs and how they bind with various receptors and what they can do to the user. And when we got to marijuana, we're told that there's never been a recorded lethal overdose from marijuana in recorded history, yet there are thousands of years of human use. It just kind of struck me as odd, especially in a college situation where you have constantly people getting sick and in very unfortunate and far too frequent situations kill themselves by over-consuming alcohol. It struck me as odd that we would be not only arresting individuals for consuming marijuana as a sacred, but also, jailing them, and in some jurisdictions for tens of dozens of years, if not life. It kind of struck me as odd. And then we went on to law school and wanted to work in policy and had some experience doing state level lobbying with the job I was doing part-time in law school, and this job opened up and I applied, and they thankfully took a chance on me, and I think we've had a good symbiotic relationship ever since.
Well, that's just an amazing story, most definitely. Now, see, here's the thing I don't understand. And before we get into states' rights and federal rights, there's been a lot of controversy about what exactly made marijuana illegal. There's that tale about Hearst that did not want hemp to be a competitor in the wood and paper industry. There's also the rumor that he just absolutely hated Mexicans, and at the time, it was thought the Mexicans who brought the marijuana plant up here, and it was going to destroy our society. What's your take on that?
Well, it's difficult to judge people's intentions and why they introduce and push for legislation, especially after the fact, and we can't ask them any longer. I've heard both of those to be true, that Hearst was opposed to marijuana because hemp provided a cheaper substance than trees, and that Ansinger kind of fought forward for those out of racial reasons, the racial animus that you discussed, directed at Mexicans. I do know that the term marijuana is actually originally a derogatory. It was meant to be a derogatory type term. There are some who don't, who think that MPP shouldn't use marijuana in the name because of that, and people should use the term cannabis. And I can greatly appreciate and respect that thought. But we use marijuana. It's so common nowadays, and it's rare that you find someone who knows that connection between that kind of racial animus and that term. That we use that because when MPP was founded in 1995, I think that you would be hard pressed to find a majority of the people that you're talking to would know the term cannabis and not marijuana. And so we kind of wanted that. Our executive director wanted the name recognition to say what the organization did.
Right, and it's just like a lot of people don't get the connection between hemp. Exactly what hemp is and what hemp is not.
Exactly.
I know a lot of people, when they see, hemp clothing, they run the other direction. And it's like, there's a process. You cannot smoke hemp, okay? Hemp is not going to bother you. It's funny how ignorance just spreads. Now, the thing that I found to be most amazing, and yes, I did do my homework over the past couple of weeks, Henry Ford actually created a green car that actually ran on hemp gasoline.
I'm serious.
And let me look through my notes here real quick here.
I have not heard about this.
Yes, let me find it. This would be great for the Jeopardy theme to come up here, And I found it just extremely odd that, everybody would want to be against this, especially the fact that with our own gas crisis right now, it would seem like, this could be the answer to our issue. Let me find it. Side effects. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, the hemp legislation, marijuana legislation in general offer lots of benefits for just communities across the country that are struggling otherwise. No one is. It can be an economic boon. It's not gonna, but by any such measure, it probably will not clear up everyone's fiscal forecast. There are larger issues at play, but it certainly won't hurt. So there's certainly both policy issues that are being considered at some level by various states across the country.
Well, it may not help I'm not going to say it's not going to help our multi-trillion-dollar deficit here. But, the thing is, I'm an old hippie from way back. And I have been clean and sober now for 20-plus years.
Oh, congratulations.
And so I find myself being a little bit on the fence. Because, me being clean, if all of a sudden I started taking marijuana, well, then my sobriety would definitely be called into question. But on the other hand, addicts and alcoholics will tell you that if you take a medicine as prescribed, you're not actually breaking your sobriety. Here's the note I found on Henry Ford. A little known fact that Henry Ford spent considerably time and energy designing a green car with an engine that would run on hemp gasoline. He created a prototype car with plastic panels that were made of hemp, wheat, and sisal fibers. The panels had an impact strength 10 times greater than that of steel, did not dent, and the car weighed 1,000 pounds less than its steel counterpart. Some 60 years later, General Motors used plastic panels on its Saturn cars. After marijuana and hemp were outlawed, products made from hemp, such as gasoline, plastics, took their place, and so you can see the picture. You can see that it just seems that people came in crowds to say, no, no, no. The evil of marijuana, the evil of hemp.
Yeah, it wasn't everybody advocating for tightening the ropes on marijuana or cannabis. In fact, during the debate over whether to pass the Marijuana Tax Act, which is what started the whole process towards prohibition, I believe it was the American Medical Association was the one group that stood up and said, you shouldn't do this. They were on record as opposing our legislation because their doctors used cannabis-derived medicines in their pharmacopoeia. So it's interesting now to see some primarily state-level medical organizations oppose medical marijuana laws when no one is trying to say that doctors have to use marijuana in their practice by any stretch of the imagination. It's just allowing those physicians who think it's best for their patients to use it,
Right. Well, I have a friend of mine that actually suffers from clinical situation-based depression.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in a situation in his life where his situation is never going to change. So this, in essence, means that, if his situation is not going to change, he is always going to be clinically depressed.
Mm.
And I was talking to him about the show this evening, and he says, all I want to do is be able to smile once in a while. I want to be able to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
He says, now it's against the law, which I find to be, I understand it's a different subject, but it's against the law to kill yourself. If you attempt to, of course, they'll lock you up in a psych ward and do all their testing on you and give you pharmaceuticals. But then again, it's also against the law to get, to purchase marijuana just for, to make you feel better. And I find it to be very, very cruel to expect a man to live that way, where he has no choice but to live out his life day in and day out feeling like shit. Excuse my French, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and you won't hear any arguments from me. I think it's, and not only is it cruel, but it's just incredibly wasteful policy as well. If your friend wants to use marijuana in the privacy of his home, why should the government prevent that from happening if he's otherwise behaving in a responsible manner and not, putting others in jeopardy by acting negligently or anything like that? There's no need for government involvement, and it's interesting because when you hear what the side effects are, the medical side effects of using marijuana, some of them are things like euphoria and feelings of happiness. And since when has euphoria been a bad thing?
Right.
And you can listen to any pharmaceutical commercial, and the side effects are extreme. Certainly not euphoria. They're pretty much the exact opposite. So, it baffles the mind, and it's incredibly unfortunate and just downright criminal as far as I'm concerned, especially when it comes to people, in situations like your friend.
I just find that, whenever I read the side effects of some of the medication he's on, and I found one to be quite disturbing, and I think it actually takes away any kind of what's the word I want to use here, respect as a human being or decency as a human being. One of the medication causes anal leakage. Now, that's scary. And
yes, it is.
And it's demeaning. I just shake my head. I'll get off that subject. I know that's one hell of a visual I just threw up there, but it just proves my point, though. If you could actually have something that is actually able to be of help with no long-term side effects, or the side effects are not as severe, why not do it?
It's a good question, and it's a question that, it's now being asked not only by a lot of people across the country, but by a lot of people in positions of power to actually make changes in the law across the country, which is good. The conversation is advancing, and it's because of programs like yours, quite frankly, that allow folks to have these kinds of conversations and actually educate your listeners and various listeners of programs across the country about what marijuana actually is. You made a comment earlier in the conversation about people just not knowing anything about it, and that's one of the big obstacles that we face as advocates is, about 10% of the population reports having used marijuana at some point in their life. And so you're dealing with a population, like 90% of the population that's apparently never tried it. And they were educated, at least those who are, voting for the most part, were educated in the just say no kind of just absolutist no kind of setting, and that doesn't allow for a proper education about what we're talking about. So our main goal is we have to go out now and kind of reteach people, this marijuana, it's never killed anyone, never caused a lethal overdose by using it. It's demonstrably safer than alcohol. It is a mild intoxicant, so you have to use it responsibly, and that responsible messaging has to, and education has to be, it's a key component as well. But, it's a process that we're starting to kind of get ahead of steam, and it's because of places like, communities like yours where you can have a nice, honest conversation, marketplace of ideas kind of thing.
Now, here's my thing I want to bring up too, okay? Again, I did my time with alcohol and illegal substances, and that's just a part of who I am. I don't try to hide it. I don't try to run from it because it's made me who I am today. But I will have to honestly say, I have never, ever wanted to become violent when I was high. It was the farthest thing from my mind.
Yeah, marijuana use has never been associated with inducing violent behavior. And in fact, it's simply a correlation, but it's interesting to see that in the first 4 months since marijuana sales have come online in Colorado, Denver has seen, I believe it's like an 11% decrease in property crime and a 6% decrease in violent crime from where they were last year. And I'm not saying it's because of that. We both know correlation does not equal causation. But it's certainly interesting that, many opponents claim the opposite will happen, and that it will be violence and property crimes and drug-seeking behavior, and it just hasn't played out. And it doesn't surprise me that it hasn't played out, quite frankly.
I actually watched, again, just to get ready for this interview, I actually watched the old movie Reefer Madness over the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And I just had to kick back and just laugh because so many people that thought they knew so much about it didn't know squat.
Yeah, it's funny. I worked at a video rental store when I was in high school, going through high school. And a little mom and pop, it was an independent place, and I used to put that in once every couple of months just to get a laugh out of it. Because it's so absurd, yet it was taken as gospel almost. It's odd, but now it's just kind of kitschy and hilarious.
Now I have to ask, who actually is your most fierce opponent when it comes to the legalization of marijuana? I mean, is there somebody or some party or some institute that actually stands out as being your most ardent support or opposition?
There's a handful that stand out. Coalition for Drug-Free America is, I guess they oppose our work. A group called Project SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. They are pretty opposed to what we do. There are police organizations and law enforcement organizations in various states that took they come out and to oppose our bills. And it all comes from a good spot. I mean, the reason why these people oppose this legislation, or at least their public reasoning for opposing this legislation, is because they don't want to see drug use increase. And no one wants to see drug use increase. That's not, we're not the, no, go use all the marijuana you can policy project, marijuana policy project, where we just believe that a public health approach that utilizes tools like regulations and age restrictions and, requires testing and proper labeling and that kind of stuff. We believe that that's a better tool to combat use, particularly problematic use, than a close your eyes, plug your ears, bury your head in the sand prohibitionist model that doesn't allow you to implement any of that. And I would... I'm hesitant to call people opponents only because it's not like I've had any personal interactions with people that's been angry with me. It's just we just have conversations and stuff. But I guess I'd be Project Fan and those types of groups.
I find it to be extremely funny. In the past 30 years, we've gone from a president who did smoke but did not inhale. We had a president that everybody knows he smoked, but he did not admit it. And now we have a president that said, yes, I did smoke, and it was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just find that to be extremely hilarious. I truly do.
Yeah. And before the one who said he smoked but didn't inhale, 2 presidents earlier than that, it was a taboo subject. It couldn't even be discussed.
I remember, I'll be 50 in October, so I'm a little bit long in the tooth. But I remember when Nixon proclaimed, his war against drugs back in the early 70s, and him actually bringing out marijuana as being one of the biggest threats to, quote-unquote, our nation's youth.
Yeah, I think he called it public enemy number 1, maybe, even.
Yes, and I don't know, I have a saying that people, I believe today, and I think this covers many different situations. But I have a saying that goes: people suffer from terminal uniqueness today. If you don't do things my way, you're automatically wrong. I'm right, you're wrong, or I'm right because you don't understand my situation. I'm right because you're not me. You're not my same color. You're not my same, whatever. Okay? There is always a reason why I am unique, and I should be the standard bearer. And it's like, I firmly believe that people need to go along with the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So tell us exactly what's happening up there on Capitol Hill. Well, I know you say you don't actually work with Capitol Hill, but the legislative part of it. What's coming up in the future?
Well, I don't do any work on the Hill itself, but as you could probably guess, we have a department that does that, and I follow it quite closely. So we can chat about that quick. A couple of weeks ago, the House debated appropriations bill, and they voted in support of an amendment that would defund the Drug Enforcement Agency for purposes of opposing medical marijuana implementation. So that was a pretty historic day as far as the marijuana policy movement is concerned. It was a great vote. I can't remember the exact vote count off the top of my head right now, but it's difficult enough getting the House of Representatives to get together and support anything, let alone something that would kind of scale back the war on marijuana. That it was a really promising sign. We're hoping that the Senate will put this same provision in their bill. We're not quite sure; it hasn't gotten there yet. But that's what's work on the federal level. There's also legislation that is alive on the federal side that would legalize marijuana, like alcohol, for purposes for adults 21 and older. There's also a bill that is kind of where I think eventually marijuana policy in the federal level is going to go, And that bill would simply just end the federal government's prohibition on marijuana. It wouldn't do anything other than just erase the criminal laws for marijuana on the federal level. And then they would leave it to the states. They would say, states, if you want to tax regulate it, treat it like alcohol, go right ahead. If you want to have a medical marijuana law, go right ahead. If you don't want to have either, that's fine too. If you choose to have some kind of regulated sales, I'm sure the federal government will make sure that there's a federal tax on anything sold to. But I think that's kind of where we're headed. And I think that we could get there in about 6 to 8 years possibly, if not maybe a little bit longer. In 2016, the election coming up in 2016, you're going to see questions more likely than not to tax and regulate marijuana on the ballot in California. If Oregon doesn't do it this year, it's 2014, they'll probably do one in 2016. Nevada, possibly Arizona, possibly Massachusetts. There's quite a bit of movement in some state legislatures, as well. Maryland has a pretty good, solid coalition arguing and lobbying their state legislator to reform their laws, tax and regulate like alcohol, and I'm kind of helping lead the charge with a good, awesome group of Rhode Island activists who are looking to do the same up there, and we've got a bill alive that we're hoping to get called to a vote here in the next couple of weeks. And we think if we can get a call to a vote that we can pass it, and Rhode Island will then become the first state to have legalized marijuana for adults through the legislative process as opposed to the ballot, which is what Colorado and Washington used in 2012. Wow. And then on top of that, there are medical marijuana laws and marijuana decriminalization laws and alive and moving through and being discussed in legislatures across the country. You know, from South Carolina with your minority leader Todd Rutherford to Oregon and Washington are even still debating medical marijuana laws, because just like everything else, it evolves and changes, and you gotta make it current.
My best friend recently moved to Alaska, and from what he's telling me, Alaska has decriminalized it.
Yeah, Alaska is an interesting state as far as its marijuana laws are concerned, because they've got criminal laws on the books, but they have a state Supreme Court opinion saying that those criminal laws violate the state constitution. They say that unconstitutional or state laws violate the right to privacy. So Alaska is kind of a little bit of a tricky area as far as what the status of it is there, but hopefully that'll all be cleared up. We're helping a group of Alaskans kind of do their campaign work right now. There's a campaign up there that'll be on November's ballot, and if that passes, then Alaska will join Washington and Colorado as states that have taxed and regulated marijuana like alcohol, and it will kind of clear up all that ambiguity as to what the status of the law is up there, which would be nice. So we're hoping that we can put that across the finish line come November, and that'll be another victory, which would be great.
Now,
marijuana policies on the march.
Great, and that sounds I have to take my hat off to you, because from what I've been talking with you now for the past couple of weeks, and you come across as an extremely intelligent man, and I want to take my hat off, because it seems like the people that come across as extremely intelligent, if you bring up marijuana policy, they're against it. And I want to take my hat off to you for being a free thinker.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I find that doing what I do, I get to work with some of the brightest people brightest and smartest and sharpest people I've ever met in my entire life, and they come at it with a passion and with a keen sense of understanding what it is that public policy should try to do, and what it is that public policy shouldn't try to do, and regulating behavior that's just otherwise, relatively benign to the person doing that behavior doesn't seem like an appropriate use of our time or money.
What do you think about the old guard saying that marijuana is just a gateway drug? And that's what they bring up about, oh my God, they go to marijuana, they're going to go to acid, they're going to go to heroin or crack. What do you say to those people?
Well, I suppose the reason why they move on is because it's available to them in the same market that they're purchasing marijuana from. I mean, it's not the drug itself that presents users with opportunities to use harder drugs such as heroin and methamphetamines and stuff. There's nothing inherent about marijuana and how it affects the user that makes them go seek additional, more dangerous substances. What it is, it's the market that it's currently available in is also the market where those substances are being trafficked as well. So it's the illegal market that runs these same products. So you have a user who's going to, a dealer primarily or originally to purchase marijuana, and they're offered other drugs, and when it just puts you in that closer proximity.
Right.
So there's that. There's a lot to be said from divorcing marijuana, which again is something that is safer than alcohol, which as a country we acknowledge that should, prohibiting it was bad. So the better market is to regulate it. It's divorcing the safer illegal substance from that illegal market and bringing it above the board. So the state knows who's selling it, to whom, where it's being sold, things like that. You can have proper education. There's the Phil Mahara, who is a syndicated columnist. She used to be editorial board of Providence Journal up in Rhode Island. She just recently had a piece syndicated that saw it was published in Denver Post, Projo, a couple other newspapers, arguing that marijuana legalization is good for the current heroin epidemic that's afflicting far too many communities across the country. Arguing that A, you can help fill depleted treatment resources on marijuana taxes, which is true, and B, there's quite a bit of upcoming evidence and anecdotal evidence from medical marijuana states of a lot of individuals who suffer from severe pain, who have been able to severely cut down on their use of opiates, and those opiate-based prescription painkillers that are also the increasing the prescribing of them has kind of led to this heroin epidemic as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It can hopefully even reduce the use of that drug and fund treatment for those who have problematic use.
Okay, now I'm going to ask the question of the night. What can myself or people like me, your regular, average, everyday citizen, do? I mean, what is actually in our power to actually do to kind of wake up our states and say, hey, look, this is what we want, and this needs to be taken care of?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that I think people maybe sometimes get frustrated hearing this, but it never hurts to write your elected officials letters, especially handwritten letters that are somewhat short, that they can read somewhat quickly. In this day of email and electronic communications, a handwritten letter kind of comes across as being more, it comes across as the writer being more, I guess, just deeper in their beliefs on the subject. They'd sit down to write it out by hand. That kind of strikes the people reading it as more important. Letters to your members of Congress, to your state elected officials is vitally important, because they're the ones who control the state laws. And just tell them who you are, explain you're a constituent, make sure you let them know if you vote, and especially if you voted for them, or if you donate, and if you donated to them. Just simply lay out that you support the sensible marijuana law if you think the current laws are a failure, because they are, and that there needs to be reform, and that they should support marijuana policy reform. I think that's incredibly helpful for everyone to do that. There are certain states where citizens have the power of the ballot available to them via the issue process. I don't know if South Carolina does. I do not believe you do, unfortunately. But in states where it's available, citizen groups can petition to get questions on the ballot, and if they can get stuff on the ballot, that's great too. But keeping on elected officials, asking them on record when you have the opportunity to where they stand on it is always important, and then getting that information to groups like Marijuana Policy Project or Americans for Safe Access if it's a medical question, or groups like Drug Policy Alliance and stuff like that. I guess that's the long and short of it. I think it's probably the most important and vital piece of it is that citizen engagement, that constituent conversation. Because ultimately, the people who are going to decide these questions, I mean, they're in their position because people voted them in. So,
and you know,
have the voters go talk to them again. You know.
You know, this is going to sound kind of odd, but I've always been a firm believer that elected officials are only trusted servants. They quote unquote do not govern. That's always been my viewpoint.
Yeah, you know, it's not far from the truth. I mean, they're there so the public can do, you know, make sure that laws and policies are best fit for the health and welfare of their communities that they serve. So I think that's probably a fair outlook.
You know, now that does not mean for somebody to call their state senator and ask, "Are you a public servant?" And when he says, "Yes," okay, give me a glass of water. No, do not do that.
Right. Also, and since you brought it up, and it's a good reminder, when we do have this citizen engagement with lawmakers, it's important to be polite and to be concise. As much or as little as you may like these individuals, they're extremely busy people, and you know, allowing them to move on is always good. Plus, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. I'm a firm believer in that myself. So there's no point in berating someone or belittling them or, you know, getting angry if they don't come around right away and say, yes, they support your idea, whatever it may be, whatever you're engaging with lawmakers about. You know, it's important for better or worse, it's important to play the game of politics. It's how it's set up. I mean, you can't change the law unless you know how to play within that realm, you know?
What you just said kind of reminded me of the story of just after Reagan was shot. They had him in the OR, and the doctor was a staunch Democrat. And Reagan looked up, "I hope we're all Republicans here."
Yeah.
And the doctor replied, "Today, sir, we're all Republicans."
Yep.
And, you know, I just thought that was a really cool story. I always thought that was a cool story. You know. Now, go ahead and give the web page that you're associated with, and I understand you also have a blog going on.
Oh, yeah. The website is www.mpp.org. That's www.m as in Mary, P as in Paul, P as in Paul.org. And the website can link to the blog. I think it's just blog.mpp.org, maybe. I'm not entirely sure, and I probably should know that off the top of my head, but unfortunately I don't. I don't know my wife's cell phone number off the top of my head either, so there's that.
Well, you know, I have a hard enough time reminding myself of my wife's birthday, so don't feel like the Lone Ranger there, my friend.
Right.
Whenever you look at the future, and, you know, I believe that we all work and we have a certain goal in mind, you know, for the end game. And you might have already touched on this, and it might be kind of an elementary question, but, hey, I ask the hard questions. What is your end game goal? What do you see on the horizon for this movement?
We like the federal government to end its marijuana prohibition and just say, okay, they're not going to have this be a federal crime anymore. You know, if you want it, if you're operating under the realm of a state law that allows for production, sale, taxation of marijuana, then give us our cut. You know, the federal government will come in and take a percent of taxes of it, I'm sure, and they should. But I mean, that's what we're asking the federal government. Just lift your hands. That's all you got to do. For the states, we encourage them to take a look at the laws and take a look at, you know, okay, what model would fit now if, assuming the federal government isn't going to come and enforce a federal prohibition, what model is the best fit for South Carolina, for instance? Would it be a model that allows the severely ill only to access marijuana through with oversight from a doctor or a healthcare professional, or is it a complete blanket prohibition like is currently happening, or is it to treat it like alcohol tax and regulate it, allow adults 21 and older to consume it, allow licensed business people to grow it in a secured fashion and sell it in a regulated structure. And I think that once the federal government ends their prohibition, that ask of the states, encouraging them to look at it, will be a lot easier. First of all, because for people like me, And second of all, I think it'll be a lot more enticing. You've seen Colorado making, I think, roughly $2 million a month so far on state sales tax from marijuana sales to adults 21 and older. And that's with a lot of stores still unable to open because they're awaiting either local licensure or they just got their license and now they have to wait for products to develop. But, there's some revenue that can come across from this, and more importantly, it doesn't have the predicted negative consequences this far. We just don't see them thus far. So, it's kind of going to show that marijuana prohibition is a whole lot of fuss over really not much of anything substantive,
And I saw a movie over the weekend, and I forget exactly what it was called, but it was actually dealing with the marijuana question. And so many products, not only for consumption, but so many products can be made from hemp and marijuana itself. I mean, for God's sakes, they actually showed a bottle of hot sauce that was made out of cannabis.
Really?
Yes, hot sauce.
Yeah, it's an entire industry that's unavailable, that entrepreneurs can, if it were made legal and licensed, that entrepreneurs could exploit. And it's not just an industry that traffics in an intoxicating substance. I mean, we've discussed hemp here. I mean, hemp is, you brought up the car, Ford's idea for a hemp-based car. I know that they're making hemp-based homes. They're constructing homes made of hemp materials, and they're incredibly strong. There's tons of products, and it's legal to have hemp products in America. You just can't grow the hemp, which is silly. You import it from Canada or China or some other place. But I think that those laws are actually starting to unwind themselves as well. And there are organizations, like I believe it's called Hemp Now, that work strictly, they're kind of like my organization, but they work on hemp and I work on marijuana,
Yeah.
It's kind of complementary work, I suppose.
Hemp fibers actually make the best rope.
Yeah, they do. In World War II, Hemp for Victory. It's a propaganda film from the United States government when they started allowing farmers to grow hemp again. And in fact, hemp still grows wild in many places across the country, in particular Wisconsin, because, again, it's a weed, and it just kind of scattered, and now you can find wild, it's non-psychoactive hemp across, scattered across the winds.
Okay, I just got this question through my Skype. Once marijuana, and I firmly believe that it is going to be legalized in the United States. I believe it's going to happen, just a matter of time. Roseanne Barr, when she was running for the presidency back in 2012, one of her things was going to legalize marijuana. But the question is, once everything is legalized, do you believe the laws will become retroactive and the people that are now serving long sentences due to marijuana will actually be released?
That is a fantastic question, and it's something that hasn't been in any legislation on the state level yet. There are many bright people working on that issue in particular. How do you address these individuals who have spent even one day is too long, but there are people who have been in jail for decades for simply marijuana. How do you address those wrongs done to those individuals? I would hope that, there would be some mass leniency, but I'm not sure that the situation has kind of worked itself out yet. It's really important to figure it out. But with this being such a new area of policy, things are kind of, they pop up, and then you deal with them as we go. But it's a wonderful question, and I wish I had a more concrete answer to give your listener. But I do think that it's certainly a vital issue that needs to be addressed.
Well, I don't want to sit here and say, well, automatically, of course, it'll happen, because that's not life. In real life, as I found in my almost 50 years of being here on this planet, you can't take anything for granted. And chances, there's a very big chance, oh yes, marijuana has been legalized, but no, you were convicted under the old law, so you're going to serve your sentence.
Right.
And I would also like to think that if it was made retroactive, and these innocent people are released, I would also like to see something put in there where they cannot sue the government for false imprisonment. I mean, let's not give, any other reason for lawsuits.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I doubt there would be any room for any kind of tort claims or anything like that. Because it's pretty clear that unless they were wrongfully convicted under the laws they were convicted of, then they were unfortunately properly convicted just under terrible laws.
Yeah, let's just say that I know human nature, and I can just see that happening too. Well, you had me locked up for 25 years over marijuana. It's legal now. It should have always been legal. So I'm going to file a tort suit against you, and you're going to get me paid. No.
Yeah, well, I suppose the availability of the civil court system in America is both a blessing and a curse at times, isn't it?
Well, I do thank you so much here. I am actually going to have to cut the interview a little bit short because I got thunderstorms coming through.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, let me let you go and get you safe then.
Well, yeah, because I don't want to have headphones on in case lightning strikes. I want to keep my ears, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like you to keep your ears too, Michael. But thank you so much for having me on. I had a great time, and I think it was a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate those who stuck around with us and heard us out,
Well, go ahead and give your contact information and give another free promo for the website in case somebody wants to reach out.
Please visit the site, Marijuana Policy Project. You can Google that or just go to www.mpp.org. If you've got questions about what's going on in any state, South Carolina, any other state, just send an email to state@mpp.org, and it will get to the appropriate person, and, you hopefully we'll hear back in a couple days. Sometimes we get a bit busy, so patience is appreciated, but, we strive to get back to everyone who writes to us, so feel free.
I look forward to having a nice long friendship with you, Robert. I feel like we have become friends here, in a cyber kind of way, that is.
Indeed, sir.
It's been a wonderful interview, and I hope that you'll come back and visit us again.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to come back on. Thank you for the invite.
Okay, you have a good night, sir, and we're going to wrap it up. This has been the Let's Talk radio show with Michael Johnson here on the Para-Rock TV Media Network. I'll see you guys next week. You guys be safe, you hear?